Hello Stampers, my name is Linda Bedinger and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. And I'd like to show you today how I made these two cards. And I had my first opportunity to really play around with the Brusho crystal color. I saved this little piece out of the box and I'll show you how I'm storing them. And I'm going to show you the different techniques that I used to create these two very different cards. And it's really a lot of fun to play with. And so I'll be showing you here how I made these cards. So let's first start by talking a little bit about the Brusho crystal colors. And I'm going to bring out some samples of some things that I've done here. Let's start with the colors themselves. This one is called Brilliant Red. It says that there, and it says that here at the top. And you'll notice I've got a push pin put into the top. This little tip came from, I think it was Patty Bennett, who said, don't even open the containers, because this stuff, when it gets out and it gets all over everything, it can make an amazing mess. And so most of what you need to do, you can do by just poking a hole in the top of the container with a push pin. And the interesting thing that does is it allows this to work like a little salt shaker. So when you turn it over, you can tap your crystals, and I'll show you how to do that, onto your work surface, and you get plenty of color. And then the other thing that the push pin does is it seals it back and makes a stopper. Now, right now I'm storing them in the box that they came in. I'll either pretty this box up or do something else with it, make one that's just a tiny bit bigger, because they just fit in here. And the colors that we have to work with are this Brilliant Red. We have this one, which is called Gamboge, G-A-M-B-O-G-E, and Gamboge is an orange color. Then we have yellow, which turns out to be, depending on how you use it, a pretty true yellow. Then we have this one, which is called moss green, and it's a combination of a bunch of colors to get to a moss green. And then we have Prussian blue. And Prussian blue is a very saturated dark blue color. And so I'm going to put these back in here and show you what I have learned so far about working with them, besides they're fun. So these are available in the new spring catalog, and they're just different. They don't necessarily match our colors, but they're close enough that they blend in pretty well. So what I've done is I did a little test sample first. So, and what I did was I just blocked this off with some tape, and I put this moss green, sprinkled it down on here, wet the paper, then sprinkled the Brusho on, and then put more water on it. And in some cases I swirled it around with my aqua painter, but you can see I left places where the crystals just kind of go into the paper. And then this is what it looks like when it's dry. So this one is the Gamboge, or the orange. This one is the Brilliant Red, and this is all done on watercolor paper. And my projects today, one is done on watercolor paper and the other one is done on the, what's it called? The shimmer paper. Shimmer white paper is what it's called. Anyway, that's the red. Then this is the yellow. And you can see all of these colors are made up of multiple different colors that get the saturated color you want. And I'm going to show you how to use it as you sprinkle it, and another way to use it. There's the yellow, and there is the Prussian blue. Now, I've watched some people try to mix the colors. Like if you mix yellow and blue, you should get a shade of green. And I've seen people try to mix the blue and the red to get a purple. And some of them have been more successful than others. And so what I did was I realized, I know a little bit about color, and so I did my own experiment here. And my estimation was that since both of those were trying to be mixed with the blue is so saturated a color that you need to use in order to make this pretty purple here. And this one is a more sprinkled purple. This is a more blended purple. That you need to add twice as much of the other color and very small amounts of the blue in order to get the purple. Same thing with the yellow and blue. To get a green, you need to use very little blue and quite a bit of yellow in order to get a more a green that is more what we would recognize and less mossy colored than this. And this particular card, I used the sprinkle technique on the flower, and then I used the blended technique on the leaves, and I'll show you exactly how I did. This one is all sprinkle and mixing a bunch of things together, and I'll show you how to do that as well. But this is the way this works, and I'll show you very quickly a smooth green that's more like the color of this and how that works. And what I did for that was I took one of our acrylic blocks here, and let's see, let me put some scratch paper down here because this is really pretty messy stuff. I'm going to put down 2 full layers of scratch paper here, maybe a third one on the bottom of that. In fact, this might be one of those times that you use one of those cardboard backings that comes on the back of designer series paper to work on. It helps keep your surface a little cleaner. So let's take the yellow. I'm going to mix a green that is more a smooth green as opposed to one that is a little bit spottier. And I'm going to take out my stopper here, and I'm just going to tap. You use this almost just like a salt shaker, and you get the crystals out here, and there's a little bit of yellow. And what I'm going to do is use my aqua painter here, and I'm going to drop a drop or two so that you can see I'm dissolving all of those crystals. I'm not letting any of them stay in crystal form. And so I'm getting this pretty yellow color. I've got a baby wipe here to wipe my brush on. Now, the blue is what makes the green when added to this. And I'm going to put my stopper back in this. This is not something you want to have an accident with. And I am just going to drop just a few. You see how few crystals that is in there of the blue. And then I'm going to use my aqua painter to push that around on the top of this crystal or the clear block, and you can see there that I've got more of a green color, and I've got a little strip of watercolor paper here, and actually we could do it on this one so you can see the difference. And so that is a green, and I can make it a more intense green by adding more blue. But you see how nice and smooth that is compared to this one. And if I add just a few more blue crystals, I get a more intense green. And you can see that here next to this, I get a much darker green. So when mixing with the blue, use a lot of whatever the other color is, and then mix the blue in. So that's just a quick little tip on how to mix the colors. Otherwise, what I would do, and let me just show you the other technique as long as we're at it. Let's do it in the red and the blue so you kind of get the idea of the purple. So I'm going to leave the blue out and bring out my red. And with the red, because the blue is so intense, I need quite a bit of red down here, and that is a lot of red. I know it doesn't look like much, but it is a lot of red. And so I'm going to use my, well, let's see if I can just coax that red into more of a concentrated area here. I'm going to use a dry brush to just move those crystals in a little bit here. Okay, and now I'm going to use my aqua painter to drop some water, and there you see that beautiful, intense red color. Isn't that gorgeous? So pretty. And now what I'm going to do to get my purple is I'm going to drop a little bit of the blue and mix it in with the red. And there you see I'm starting to get more of a purple color. And the more blue I add, the more intense my purple gets. And you can keep mixing it until you know, if you overdo it, then you get mud. But there's that, and it's kind of a red purple, that one. I used a lot of blue on that one, and I mixed it like I did here on a block until I got the color that I wanted. So it depends on whether you like this more rough look, or you want something more intense and sure. So then I found that rinsing off my aqua painter fairly quickly and getting the color off leaves my nib back to where it was. So that's a little bit about how the color is used and mixed. I might save that green and reactivate it here in a minute. And let me put my blue away for now. And really, one little hole in the top of these containers is more than enough. Now, I've seen people take the color off and put 1/4 of a teaspoon and a lot of water and let it run down a page. And at some point, I will try that as well. And or using my my spritzer to push the color down a page. I think that would be a very interesting way to look at this as well. Okay, so let me tell you what I did to make each of these little cards. So the first one is I have some shimmer paper here, and this little panel that I have cut here is, let me see if I can find my notes. It's a very small panel. It's 2 5/8 by 3 1/2. And what I'm using on this panel is my Momento black ink. This is a nice, juicy, just inked up pad. And I'm using, the stamp sets that I'm using to make the cards that I'm doing today is this sheltering tree, because I wanted this tree form here. And I'm using Friendship is a Sheltering Tree, and You Warm My Heart to make this one. And then the other stamp set that I'm using is this absolutely gorgeous Remarkable You stamp set. And I'm using this flower and this leaf spray here. And I'm using You Are Remarkable as the sentiment. So those are the stamp sets that I'm using. And I have, let's see, this stamp, this tree stamp, is a photopolymer, so we're going to need a pierce mat underneath it. Get this done. And what I'm going to do is just ink this up and ink it up until I'm absolutely sure I've got this thing covered. And for this, your Momento, at least for this tree, your Momento needs to be fairly juicy in order to get all of the coverage. That trunk is a little on the thick side, and you want to make sure that there's plenty of color all over that in your branches. Now this little tree just fits on this panel. There we go. And I think I've got a little spot on the bottom because I started to set my stamp down and then didn't do it. I'll let that sit on there for just a second and really get soaked in and take off my tree. And that's pretty good. I've got pretty decent coverage on that. And there's my little spot down there. I'll have to figure out something to do. Maybe I can use that ground or something underneath there to get that. But the objective here is to really show you how to use the Brusho. Okay, so on this, as I think about it, to get this look of the fall, and I did this a couple of different times. This is one of the cards that I made, and I actually made several. This is another one that I made. And then I have a couple of samples also of using the Brusho as I was trying to figure this out. And some of these, this one is a little bit more washed out, and this one is quite a bit lighter, and I just used a few less crystals on this one. And on this one I used my spritzer to get the color to take. So on this one we can use everything but the blue. So I've got the gamboge, which is the orange, and I'm going to just spritz a little bit of the orange around on my tree. And with this one, I'm not being terribly precise because I want the color to kind of be all over. It's more a representation of a tree than it is the tree itself, because there's no distinctive leaves. Now this is the Brilliant Red, and again, going to spritz a little bit of it around. You can see how small amount I'm using. And then I have my yellow. And then I have my moss green. Okay, so I'm actually going to put quite a bit of the green down, which means we'll get a few purple highlights, because like I said, all of these are done by mixing various colors to get the color that they want. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is use my spritzer, and I've tried spraying close to the card and further away from the card, and I would say about 6 or 7 inches away seems to get me the look that I like the best. So I'm just going to move my pierce mat out of the way now and see if I can get this color to activate. Okay, now I am going to dab up some of the bigger pools of water on this piece of shimmer white. And there on that one, we do have a little bit of the color that's smoothed out a bit more, and some of it that's left in crystal form. Now you can tape this down for a little less warping, and to make this move along, I'm going to use my heat tool to heat this and dry it, and then I'll show you how I take the warp out. So I'll quiet the video while I do this. Okay, and what I found is when you let this dry naturally and you have enough water on it, the colors kind of spread a little bit more. And if you have less water on it, then you get more of this like crystal effect. Otherwise, it does kind of melt in to everything that's going on. And to take out the warp with this, I'm just using my bone folder, and I can feel a few of the crystals still on there. So I will remove those and use my bone folder to kind of flatten this piece out a little bit. I really think that's pretty. It does look a little bit like a watercolor wash kind of technique, but there it is with all of the colors in it. And you can see the greens, the yellows, the reds. It's really very pretty, I think. And then to complete this card, what we're going to do is just back this with a little piece of black, and this black is 2 7/8 by 3 3/4. And so I'm going to use quite a bit of snail. Let's see, where's it? To see if I can't continue to flatten this out. So I'm going to set this with kind of an even border all the way around. All right, there we go. Now let me bring the card back in so you see what it is I'm doing. There's my card. And you see this one's quite a bit different than that. They come out different every single time. Isn't that fun? I just love it. And on this one, I put it on a piece of, let me make sure that's cut right. It is. This is 4 by 5 1/4. And I put this piece on with dimensionals, sort of closer to the top of the card. And again, I use quite a few dimensionals, again, in an effort to keep the warping under control, because the shimmer paper doesn't hold up quite as well as watercolor paper, and that's not a surprise because it's not nearly as heavy duty, but probably better than cardstock. I'll try this on cardstock at some point as well and let you know how that works. I'll do another video on more Brusho techniques after I've had a chance to play a little bit more with the various kinds of techniques, and I'll come back within a week or so and do another Brusho video and feature 2 more techniques of working with it. And I'm sure as time goes on, there are lots of people doing different things with this, trying to get the techniques out there. So I'm going to set this even right to left and towards the top of my card. There we go. Now I have my Momento out, so that's what I'll continue to use to finish this card. And what I have is this Friendship is a Sheltering Tree. It's quite a long stamp, but it actually works beautifully right down at the bottom of this card. So I'm just going to ink this up with my Momento ink and place this, oops, I guess I need my Pierce mat. So many things to remember. Okay. But you want to give yourself the best chance for success on these things, because you sure don't want to do this over if you don't have to. And there we go. Friendship is a sheltering tree. Going to hold that in place for a second. And pull that up. Very nice. And then on the inside of this card, what I did for decoration was I took my tree again and I inked up the tree more on one side than the other. And I put the trunk right along the edge of the card down towards the bottom and got an image of the tree sort of partially on the card. And let's see, on the inside of this, I also, while I've got this out, is You Warm My Heart. And so I'll do that right up here at the top in the center. It's a pretty little font too. Nice, and it's a nice script. Okay, so then I can put my Momento ink away, and I also used my old olive ink, and what I did was I kind of cleaned up my stamp again here, and then I used my old olive ink again on that same side of the tree, and I put this image next to the tree and offset it this direction by little 1/8 of an inch, something like that, so that I'm going to overstamp the tree and get the impression also in old olive. And there it is. And so that little double stamped effect will tie in the old olive from the front of the card, as well as using the tree form. So that is all of the stamping for this one. So now it's a matter of placing this on here, and I think I just used snail on that. All kinds of, it's like an obstacle course on this desk. Here we go. And so placing this on the front of my card. Trying to get the same border all the way around. There we go. That's more like it. All right. And so there is our first card. The only other thing I did for embellishments is that I did use, let's see my pokey tool. I did use 3 of these black rhinestones that I had left from the year-end catalog, and I've got several sheets of them. I loved these things, and they retired them. I'm so bummed. And put some black rhinestones, just 3 of them, right down the side of the card to offer a little bit of color. And you can see here are the 3 versions of this one that I did. And I think I like the one that we just did just about the best. Although, oh, I like them all. Aren't they pretty? I just think it's just such a wonderful additional tool to have in our arsenal. Okay, so let's move on to the second card. Let me move some of these things out of the way, and I'll show you about the techniques that I used for the second card. All right, and to remind you, here is our second card, and I think it's a very elegant card. Just as beautiful as it can be, and actually, in the scheme of things, quite simple. And so I did some embossing in gold on watercolor paper. So what we need to make this one is I used a Pear Pizzazz base that was cut 4.5 by 11 and scored at 4 1/4 and scored at 5.5. So we'd have a top folding card. Then I have a piece of watercolor paper that is 4 by 5 1/4 that will be here. Then I have a piece of Very Vanilla for the inside that is also cut at 4 by 5 1/4. Then the other thing you need is some scrap pieces of watercolor paper in order to do our embossing. And so what I'm going to do is the first bit of embossing I'm going to need to do is on the face of this card. And so I have my stamp sets ready to go here. And this is a trick I learned. I'm just trying it out from a gal that's over in the UK, and she said that this stuff, it's called Surgical Spirit, and I got it on Amazon, and it's got lots of warnings on it, and I just saturated a little cotton swab here, and I'm keeping it in one of these little old containers that I had for, I don't know, brads or something. And what she does is cover the surface of the stamp or the block like this, and then put it aside. And then you'll notice this one I've put my, I'm going on faith here, I put my sticker on the back of this as she says, and let that dry for a second, and then place this sticker or stamp on this block. And I'm just experimenting with it, but even, you know how hard these are to stick, that's on there pretty darn good. Now, you have to keep swabbing them, but if that's all it takes to keep stickers on here so you can really see what you're doing and what stamp you're using, and that's not coming off. So far, I'm pretty impressed. I'll let you know as time goes on how it goes. All right, so this one is a red rubber stamp, so I don't need anything underneath it. And I'm going to be using my embossing buddy on my card here. And on this one, I stamped the leaves more in the middle of the card, and I think I'm going to move them up and a little bit to this side so I can place the flower further down and have those leaves kind of cover or surround the top of the flower. So we'll see how I do here. But I'm going to put some Versamark on here. Give this one last turn with that. And I'm going to place my leaves more up in this corner. And then I'm using gold embossing powder. So I've got my gold embossing powder here. And get a smaller tub for that. And I'm going to take my piece here and this is watercolor paper. And not too bad. All right. So I'm going to need this again in a minute, but I can set it aside. And I'm going to use my brush here to take off any stray powder. And I'll use my heat tool and quiet the video. Okay, so that's that bit of stamping. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish my stamping on this one. I have my You Are Remarkable on here, and I use that same stuff on there. And so I'm going to put my Versamark on here. And I'm going to put it over on this side. Okay, bring back my gold embossing powder. Okay, so there is the stamping done on that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is work on our small panel to do our flower. Nope, this is it. And so now I'm going to remove, let's see, let me clean this one up a bit. And then put on this my flower stamp, which is here. This is such a beautiful set. Just gorgeous. Let me put it on like that. And then use my Versamark on this. And place my flower, because I'm going to fussy cut out my flower, but I'm going to give some room to do some watercoloring here. So I'm just going to set that kind of in the center. You probably could cut this to about 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 and have enough room to do this flower. Okay, so now again with the gold embossing powder. Okay, so there's my flower, and what I'm going to do is use my aqua painter and put some water in each of these areas. And the embossing will help contain the, oops, I see a spot that isn't embossed. Wow. All right, so what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to quiet the video and use my heat tool and see if I can get this dry so we can move on with our card. Okay, that's fairly dry. And what it had the effect of doing was remelting some of the gold embossing powder and dulling it down a bit. So now that this is fairly dry, I'm going to go ahead and fussy cut out this piece, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here's my fussy cut flower, and now we're going to color in the leaves on this. And again, what I used was the yellow. So I'm going to put some yellow down on this block and move that around with my aqua painter. Put a drop of water on there. Maybe put a little bit more yellow on that. There we go. Okay, a nice intense yellow and a little bit of water. And then I'm going to add the blue. And start with just a little and see what kind of a green I get. That's a pretty green. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to color in my leaves. And again, the embossing will contain the watercolor effect. You can see I'm just laying the color down, trying to make sure that all of the watercolor pieces inside the leaves are colored. And like I said, this green can change to less intense and more intense depending on how much blue you have and how saturated your yellow is. But I think that's very pretty. So we have kind of a well-behaved green and a not well-behaved flower as far as color is concerned. So let me wipe that off and put away my Brusho colors. I gotta tell you, this stuff is just great fun to mess with. All right, there we go. So now I'm going to lay my flower down on my card, get the right placement, and you can see I've used a combination of large and small dimensionals. So now it's a matter of how I place my flower on here, and I could have it going the opposite direction of the leaves. I could have it going the same direction, kind of liking that. I think on this one, that's what I'm going to do. There we go. We have our flower going one direction and our leaves going another. And that's a little different than the other card, but again, some of these are different every single time. So now we have just a little bit more embossing to do on this one. And I'm going to take my piece of Very Vanilla and I'm going to emboss this flower on the inside, what I did was I just embossed in gold the flower down here in the corner, and I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take my flower stamp. Okay, so what I'm going to do is use my embossing buddy down here on the bottom of my panel for the inside, and use some Versamark on my flower and get an impression of that flower right down here in the corner. Then I'll bring back in my gold embossing powder and get this panel down here. There, that's pretty good. And now I'm going to just again quiet the video while I emboss this. Now it's just assembly, so you know, I'm going to let that dry, and while I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put this piece on the front. This watercolor paper has such beautiful texture on it that it almost creates a background. It's just lovely. Okay, so there we go. Put that on there. That is just so pretty. And then this piece again, just with some snail. There we go. All right, so there's the projects for the day. Let me take out, this is the one that we made today, and this is the one. This is the original that I showed you on that one, and the original that I showed for the flower. Aren't they just beautiful? I am so pleased with how these have come out. Like I said, I'll be back maybe next week with another technique video and some resulting cards using the Brushos in some different kind of ways. I think also this one would be great fun to use the blends on this particular flower just to create some different kind of looks. I think that would be beautiful in purples. Anyway, there is the project for the day, and anything that you see here, including these amazing Brusho crystal colors, are available on my website, www.lbedinger.stampinup.net. And if you don't already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I'd love to be your demonstrator, and or you could join my team. I'd love to have you on my team. And so let's see, the prize draw for this month is the Barn Door Bundle, and I'll probably on to make at least a card with that Barn Door Bundle, and that's the prize draw for the month of January. Anybody that puts an order in with me during the month of January is eligible to be in the drawing. And subscribe and share the videos that you see here, and that's it for me. I'll be back with more projects and more cards. Bye.